We're here to share stories, insights, practical tips to help you lead strategically while caring. Richard.
I don't know what it is. I've not got a lot of sleep, maybe. I don't know. But every time you say it, I just crumble. I was doing so good.
You were doing so good. I was so proud of you. We're almost there.
Can you just not say it? Can you just take that one part out?
No.
Okay, start over one more time.
Welcome to the Ministry Mix podcast, where we're bringing you... We can't do this.
We can. I've gotten so little sleep the last couple of days.
All right. Welcome to the Ministry Mix podcast, where we're bringing you real conversations for the souls and strategies of ministry leaders. I'm Phil Gifford, and I'm joined by my co-host, Richard Pope.
Hey!
Whether you are a seasoned pastor or ministry leader or just stepping into leadership for the first time, we are here to share stories, insights, practical ideas to help you lead strategically while caring for your soul. Each one of our episodes, we dive into topics that matter for your mission, your calling, and your personal growth. Today, in this episode, we're diving into a topic that kind of flowed out of a book I was reading.
I want to read the book. Is it good?
It's a great book. It's 6 signs that you're building trust with the spiritually disconnected. And let me explain where that came from. So, like I said, I was reading a book called I Once Was Lost. And it deals with the movement people make in their souls and their ideas and their openness. Kind of, he calls them thresholds, but thresholds they have to cross in order to eventually, turn their life around, find Christ, receive Him, and move from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of light. So, it's gospel conversion. What has to happen in a soul. And what I loved about this is because it really helps. They actually interviewed lost people who are spiritually disconnected, rather than just like what we think happens, but interview what happened in your life as you came to Christ. People that did college ministries. So really practical, but super helpful in me and how I view people, pray for people, and experience people. But the first threshold that they have to cross is a threshold of trusting a Christian.
Wow.
That and I think this is so true, right? Like, I only believe things or really listen to things that are told to me by people I trust.
Right.
And I think this is, I don't know how old this book was. I don't think it's actually super recent. I think it's a relatively not a yesterday book sort of thing, but I think even more so exaggerated with the amount of information that is thrown at us today between social media and just anything around us. Everybody's throwing opinions at us.
Yeah. One thing I would love to point out. I was just Googling while you were talking, and Affinity, which is like a kind of like a barn or a Lifeway, only 55% of people trust ministry leaders to tell the truth.
55%?
Which means that 45% of people are just going to assume that ministry leaders are lying to them. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about building trust. Another thing I looked up is percent of, in America, Christians who go to church. Only 44% of Protestants regularly attend services, which makes me say, not to say that there's probably people who are saved and not attending church, but there's probably people in that group who would say, oh, I'm a Christian, but they're actually spiritually disconnected.
Right.
So this topic is super, I think, fundamental. If you're going to actually reach lost people, if you're actually going to push back darkness, you have to start with this. You have to build trust, because they don't trust us.
Mm-hmm. And I use the word spiritually disconnected in here because I think that's a broad encompassing term for like people that say they're Christian on a survey, but then don't show fruit. We're not God. We can't look deep into their souls and say, oh, yes or no, but we don't see necessarily evidence of a walk with Jesus. They could tell you they're disconnected. They could tell you they're lost, they're whatever, but spiritually disconnected is a broad term to say we don't see gospel fruit and health in you.
My mic is like falling down.
Yeah, poor Richard. Of all the episodes and barriers we're having right now to this final episode for the day we're recording, your mic refuses to stay where it belongs.
It's the devil. He doesn't want us to talk about this.
Well, I think this is actually so good for ministry leaders.
Yeah, I agree.
What I was saying before, we live in a skeptical and so much information that we tend to filter out information if it doesn't come, hopefully, and that's a good thing, right? I don't want to believe every TikTok reel I see or every TikTok video I see or reel I see. Like I want to have a filter of, is this a trustworthy source? And so, as ministry leaders, it's easy for us to get overly involved in ministry that we kind of forget some of the relational components that would lead toward trust with those who are outside the church and spiritually disconnected. And I think if we want to have an evangelistically effective church, ministry leaders kind of set that temperature. So we need to be leading out on this.
I agree.
So if you're a church ministry leader, you are not, no matter what ministry, from kids to adults to worship, like, your job is to build trust with the spiritually disconnected.
Amen. Amen.
I think, I mean, you mentioned this before. You said 55% don't trust a pastor.
Yeah, 55% of people do not. Sorry, 45% of people do not trust a pastor to tell them the truth.
Gotcha. I think
about half the population.
I think even more broadly, like, Christians typically have, for whatever reason, bad reputations in our communities.
Yeah. That's true where we
especially
are.
where we're serving. Yeah. Like, it is not a healthy, trustworthy thing. So that leads us back to the topic of this, which is, how do we actually build trust in order for the gospel to be heard?
Yeah.
So, 6 ways, I think, 6 signs will show us that you're doing that. And here's the first one. With the spiritually disconnected people that are in your life. Now, let's assume that you know people who are spiritually disconnected. That's not a safe assumption for every Christian.
Right.
But assuming that you know spiritually disconnected people, one of the signs that you are building trust is if you have asked and care about their story.
Yeah.
You know, so much of the theme we've talked about today in our podcast batch recording is learning to listen and ask questions. We've had that in almost every podcast so far today. But one of the signs that you are building trust is that you are asking and hearing and learning their story, and they're sharing it with you.
Right.
So, like, you understand their background, you understand what's going on in their life. There was a person that we had kind of met at the school, and this is several years ago. And I remember when one of the first times their kid took part in one of our church's camps, like a sports camp or a VBS or something we were doing for reaching families. And this person doesn't go to church, and we don't know their faith background beyond that. But as they were dropping their kid off, they just shared, and we started asking about their story and like their church experience, and learned in just like 3 minutes, just kind of had this kind of outpouring of background and experiences.
Right.
And that was such a key turning moment for our relationship, because they trusted us with their story and their experiences, and that we wouldn't use it against them. We wouldn't hurt them with it. We wouldn't judge them for it. But it takes trust to tell somebody your story.
It does. It does. And I think when you get to that point where someone's comfortable to say, here's what my life has been, especially of a different worldview or faith place.
Yeah.
I think it would take even more. Like, it's really easy as a Christian, I think, to share your story with another Christian. I think it's harder for a non-Christian to share it with a Christian, because there's the fear of judgment. There's the fear and some of that is substantiated by history and trends and the way Christians.
It's real fear. Unfortunately.
And the next sign, and I think it really builds off the first one. Have they ever called you for help? Mm-hmm. You know, it's when my toilet leaks, I call a plumber. Mm-hmm. When my lights won't come on, I call an electrician, or I pay my electric bill. When I'm having an issue with my boiler, I call an HVAC company. When someone calls you and asks for help, I do think there's a level of trust. There's also a level of almost like a dependency. Like, man, if you can get lost people who don't necessarily believe like you believe, or follow Jesus, or consider spiritual things, or maybe they think they do, but they're not in a healthy place. If they start calling you and asking you for advice, or asking you, hey, you know, my wife and I just had a really bad fight, I don't know what to do. That's such a gospel opportunity, but 2, that's a sign that you've moved past that initial barrier. Like, they're starting to lean on you a little, which is a huge opportunity. You know, I remember once I was serving in youth ministry, and it's not uncommon to have kids who have come from homes where mom and dad went to church a little bit growing up. So the parents bring the kids to youth group. The parents will bring the kids to youth group because, you know, I went to youth group growing up, and the parents aren't actually spiritual. They're disconnected themselves. But it's not uncommon, you know, you love the kids well, that eventually the parents start asking you questions.
Yeah.
And that for me was always such a big win. It's like, man, now the parents are asking spiritual questions because of the way they're seeing that we're loving their kid, we're finding a safe place.
What do you think I should do in this situation with my teenager?
Yeah.
What do you think I should do about this job?
Right.
And they're trusting you enough to not just like unload on them,
right,
but to actually care about what you say. So yeah, when people give you advice, that's huge.
Yeah.
I think a third one for me would be, are they real with me?
Yeah.
As far as just everything they're thinking. And one of the, this could be partially my personality of being a little bit weird, but like I try to save my pastor conversation like as long as it's not weird, like lengthy wise. In other words, when I meet somebody at the school or a friend, I don't wear like I'm a pastor t-shirt on, and maybe I should, maybe I'd have some interesting ministry moments, but generally speaking, my experience in our community has been, when they find out I'm a pastor, the conversation changes. And I think that'll be true for a ministry leader or an active church member. When they find out you're a strong, practicing, and leading Christian, they start apologizing for swear words. They start like it's almost like they put on this. They want you to think that they're somebody they're not, or they like either they think you're going to be offended by it, or there's just it just feels like there's a masking of everything from words to emotions to whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And so if somebody is actually real with you, that is a sign that they trust you.
Right. I agree.
They can be themselves around you.
Yeah.
And so that's why I kind of like, sometimes I hold back that card. Hopefully it's always a tension, right? You want to share Jesus with them, and you want it, and you're not ashamed of anything you're doing, but you want to build that relational trust first in order so they can ultimately hear and be themselves.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's so true. One of my favorite things is somebody who will find out I'm a pastor, and they'll like cuss or something, and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm sorry."
They get all weird about it, right?
Yeah, and I really love, and this is gonna sound so weird and unspiritual, but I love when someone gets to a point where they just say it in front of me, and they're not even phased. Yeah, I'm just there.
It feels good. I don't say it feels good, right? Oh man, they're acting all crazy in front of me.
Yeah.
And we're using cussing words as an example. I don't want to get legalistic, but it could be anything, right?
There's lots of things
like the heart, like the emotions, the discouragement,
right.
And of course we see this Sunday morning, right? People come in and put on their Jesus face so that you think that they've had amazing devotionals all week long, and they're just come there when they're coming to the church to raise their hand and celebrate, when in reality, like they're crushed under anxieties. But when people need to be real, and at the first time, I think, and that's kind of actually leads into what you're about to say.
Yeah.
I was about to make a point, and then I realized you're going to make the same thing. Sorry.
So are they comfortable being honest with you? But on the flip side, the next one, are you comfortable being honest with them? Mm-hmm. As a relationship grows and there's relational equity, you tend to become more comfortable sharing how you feel. I remember seeing a commercial right around the election, and it was like an awkward first date. And it was a guy and a girl meet, and she's like a hardcore Republican and he's like a hardcore Democrat. And basically the whole date, they're like texting about the election. They'll be like, "Oh, sorry, I got a text." And they're responding, and they're saying conflicting things to their, friends. And then finally they look up and they're just like, "I had a great date. I did too. I'm a Republican. I'm a Democrat." And they just like punch each other or something. But I think what I want to grab from that is this. When you build time, when you build equity, when you build relationship, when you show someone you love them and care for them and you're there for them, over time, not only will they be honest with you, you can be honest with them. You can say things like, "Hey, I don't really agree with you on this," or you and I disagree on this as a matter of faith, or we disagree on this social issue or worldview. But I think that can only come from equity and time and trust, right?
Yeah.
So this is a sign that you've built trust, that you're comfortable to say, "Hey, I don't know if I agree with you, but I love you." Mm-hmm. And they're willing to receive that on the other hand. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's like you can be you in your beliefs, your opinions, your emotions. They can see you on a good day. They can see you on a bad day. They can understand your opinion. Like having those conversations and knowing that you can still be friends shows that there's trust there. There's trust that I am bigger. Like our friendship is deeper than our political opinions or our hot takes on this crazy thing or that thing. It's like, so you can care for each other in the middle of that. So I think that's a good sign when you can actually be honest and you feel that. Like it's hard to actually articulate when that moment is, like when there's this guarded wall and then there's not.
Right.
So you're trying to move beyond that. A fifth sign, I think, is beyond the advice, advice would be like, I'm almost kind of, I would actually probably put the advice sign later on in the trust process.
Sure.
Like first you're sharing if you're at kind of like building a list of like Hanos Koresh, I don't think it's necessarily linear, but if you're moving from like learning their stories to being real, and this one is actually kind of probably toward the beginning, but have they asked you, or have you asked them for physical help and needs?
Yeah.
In other words, when something goes wrong at their house,
right,
or when their kid needs picked up from school, or the test of like moving furniture, right?
I just heard my wife laughing with your wife.
Oh, is that what that was?
Yeah.
Like I could hear, I couldn't tell. There was just noise. Now we've been laughing so hard during these podcasts. Like my family was concerned about us.
Yeah. No, we're good.
So my point is this: like, do you ever hear of like the move friendship tests?
Yeah.
If you're like, I need to move a piece of furniture. Who's got a truck and who can help me on Saturday? Like your real friends are the ones that'll show up and help you move. And I think that's true for spiritually disconnected people. Like, I would actually venture to say that most church people have acquaintances with those who are spiritually disconnected. But most of our friendships might not pass the move test, where they're on your short list when the washer's broken and you need to borrow a load, or when this physical thing is happening. So basically, I think there's even a picture of dependency on one another. Like, I can lean into you for support. So on the flip side, you asking for help is probably an important part in building this.
I agree.
Like, we tend to want to not burden people.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll figure it out, or I'll hire somebody to do this, or I'll do this. When I wonder sometimes if those moments that we need help and we like kind of independently try to do it ourselves, if we're robbing an opportunity for trust building and engagement with others. Yeah. By trying to do it all ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. The last one that we have on today's list is this: do you just spend time together? Mm-hmm. And I want to qualify that. If you invite someone over to your house to share the gospel with them, that's cool. If you only ever spend time with them to share the gospel with them, they are going to put up a wall
fast.
And because nobody likes feeling used. Yeah. And while I do think there's this genuine like call to hospitality and service, and invitation and I think relational evangelism is very biblical, but you don't relate just for the sake of getting them to say yes to Jesus. You relate to them because you love them. And I think that's a qualifier, right? Like, people can tell if your love is love or if it's like rooted in some sort of transaction. Yeah. Nobody wants to be a stat on your church's scorecard for how many people got saved that year. Right. Like, nobody wants that. Mm-hmm. No non-believers like, man, I really hope my friend, the pastor, Jerry, I really hope Jerry can count me as a baptism this year. Yeah. So when they feel like you only reach out to invite them to church, or you only reach out, we tell people in our church this: hey, if you only reach out, if you have a list of people you're sharing the gospel with, you're doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. If you only talk to them to share the gospel with them or to invite them to church, they're never going to want to be your friend.
Exactly. Well, they become a project or a target.
And nobody wants to be a project.
No. So to me, like, are you watching football together on a Sunday? Are you just chilling on the deck and having a conversation? Are they just having dinner with no agenda? Yeah. Like, you just like being, and I would say not just are you spending time, but you like spending time with them. Like, they're just your friends.
Well, some of the greatest traction we've gotten with non-believers, because campus is filled with non-believers who became believers. One of the common stories we hear is they were out together on Saturday night, at dinner, at one of the local downtown places, and they go, oh yeah, it's getting late, I gotta go. Well, it's only like 8 p.m. Yeah, but I serve on the worship team at church, or I serve on the prayer team, or I serve in kids, and I gotta get up at like 7 a.m. Well, you know what I mean? Like when you actually have a relationship, you have opportunities to model commitment and faith and spiritual life pursuing Jesus in a way that you don't if all you ever do is invite them to church. Yeah. Like, if you actually build a relationship that's rooted in love and knowing them and caring for them and seeing them, they're going to be way more receptive, because when you care for someone, they tend to care for you. Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, why do you get up so early on Sundays? Well, because I go to church. Well, I know you go to church, but well, no, I actually serve. Like I believe, you know what I'm saying? It gives you access to share things that are more than just join us this Sunday. You don't want to miss it. We have a petting zoo. Like, nobody gives a crap.
Your church has a petting zoo?
Never has.
Well, that's an interesting outreach idea.
Okay.
Actually, I used to do those. I've never. Oh, that's not true. I've done that one time. We did a live nativity at one of the churches I was at.
That's cute.
Which is basically like we hired donkeys and goats, and kids could like hang out with them and then take a picture with baby Jesus.
More fun is dressing people up like donkeys.
I don't think that would be a great way to build trust with the spiritually disconnected.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, all of these are just relational things, right?
Yeah.
You are saying you're not just in proximity now. You're trying to actually build a genuine love and relationship for people. So I think just taking steps toward all these different signs, ask them about their story, talk about some things, be in conversation about advice, be real with them, invite people, hang out with people. Just really quick, Richard, we had a couple extra minutes before our episode runs out time wise. In your experience with unchurched people in your context at Canvas, what are some ways that Christians, and we'll be careful with this one, right? But can destroy trust and like, obviously we want to move toward trust, but what are some maybe things just to warn about that can destroy trust?
I mean, I think we actually already poked at one, treating people like projects.
Yep.
I text you every Saturday night to invite you to church, but I don't talk to you besides that.
Yeah. You're a project.
Yeah.
And they're going to feel that.
Yeah. Another way is, and this is not to over spiritualize or be legalistic, be who you are Sunday morning at my church service at 10:30. Be who you are at 10:40, middle of the worship set. Be that person all the time.
Yeah. Hypocrisy.
Because what happens if let's say a lost person or spiritually disconnected person comes to church with you or visits your church, and they see you acting very different than they do the rest of the time.
And in your neighborhood. Yep.
They might love you, but they're not going to love the God you lie about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like, don't be,
hypocrisy will destroy duplicity, maybe.
Yeah. And one other one that I think in our context is huge. This is hard. I'm in a very politically diverse area.
Yeah.
I know you are too. City, super politically liberal. County, super politically conservative. County seat is in city. So like constant arguments, right? Mayor, county councilman might just punch each other. Like it's just weird. Our nation is very politically divided. Don't love your politics more than your Jesus.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times it's like, it's not just Christians, non-Christians, Christians, people, we get so stuck in our camps of ideologies. I'm not saying don't have convictions.
No, but I think you need to be cautious with your convictions.
Yeah, I agree.
It's very cautious how you communicate your convictions.
Right.
We saw this during COVID. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't share things, you shouldn't do this, but like, I think as a ministry leader, you not just are your words are important testimony, but your social media, your everything matters. So like, if you're constantly sharing this conspiracy on one side or the other, or this extreme thing on one side or the other politically, or even just like, how many Christians lost credibility and trust when we flipped out over like the Starbucks mugs or took off Merry Christmas and put Happy Holidays. And we began this culture war against Target for, I feel like that can disintegrate trust pretty quickly if we're not careful. So, I would actually add, I think, if we become quickly defensive as Christians, I'm not saying like that we get rolled over and we don't no apologetics and we don't have reasons, but I think if your first instinct when you're bumped up against in your faith and your values or whatever it might be by people who don't share your faith and your values is defensiveness, that can shut off people's trust pretty quickly. But realizing that spiritually disconnected people are going to have spiritually disconnected opinions and ideas, I think helps open us up to love them more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, you just have to be, trust takes a really long time to build.
Yeah.
But if we're not cautious, it can go away pretty quickly.
I agree.
So I think as a ministry leader, we want to be building trust with people, not just on our team, but those who are in relationship around us. And I think that keeps you fresh as a ministry leader too.
It does.
That's what our mission is to bring the gospel to the nations and to help disciple people. So we always want to be looking for ways to build trust, because that is that first step. They are more likely to hear the gospel, to change their life, to receive Jesus, from a place of trust. I'm not saying that you don't share your faith on the airplane or wherever it might be, but realize that the most fruit's going to come from a place of trust.
Do you ever hear the oikos thing? So oikos, I guess, is a word that means like your immediate circle, right?
Yeah.
It's not yogurt. I mean, it is yogurt, but
Is it? Okay.
there's an oikos yogurt, yeah. But the idea is you live out the gospel in your oikos.
Mm-hmm.
So build trust with people, spend time with them. Don't just tell them the gospel, live the gospel. And the gospel's pretty sexy. The gospel sells itself. I remember hearing a pastor say that once.
Okay.
The gospel, I mean, to a world, like nobody wants the gospel at first, but everyone wants to be loved, valued, saved, cherished, cared for, protected. And I think when we live that out genuinely in our world, people will actually see it.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, ministry leader, let's go do that. Let's build some signs. Let's look for our lives. Evaluate your life. Sometimes it's easy to get sucked into the busyness of ministry that we miss out the opportunity to build that kind of trust. So thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Ministry Mix. If you found today's conversation helpful, be sure to subscribe. We don't want to miss future episodes and content that can help you lead and minister in your context. And if you could take a minute to review us, give us some feedback, help us connect with other leaders just like you. If you've got questions or topics you'd like for us to dive into, connect with us on social media. Let us know what's going on. But until next time, keep leading with purpose and caring for your soul.
Peace out.
Whether you are a seasoned pastor or ministry leader or just stepping into leadership for the first time, we are here to share stories, insights, and practical tips to help you lead strategically while caring for your souls. In each episode, I cannot do this. In each episode, we'll dive into topics that matter to your mission, your calling, and your personal growth.